They threatened to sue me over $16,000, but by the time I was done with them, they'd lost over $158,000, and their parents' marriage was in shambles. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but when your own blood turns on you, sometimes revenge is the only justice left. If you've ever been betrayed by family, by the people who are supposed to love and protect you, then this story is going to hit you hard. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe and follow, and settle in for one of the most satisfying revenge stories Reddit has ever seen. When I was just 3 years old, my grandparents passed away. I barely remember them, but they loved me enough to set up a savings account in my name, one I could access when I turned 21. When I did, there was just over $300,000 in that account. But that wasn't all. They left a handwritten letter, too. In it, they said they wanted me to share the money fairly with any other Smith-Jones children. My dad is a Smith, my mom was a Jones, but I never had full siblings, only 2 half-brothers, Mac and Joe, same dad, different mom. Legally, I didn't owe them a cent, but emotionally, I saw them as my little brothers. So I did what I thought was right. I decided we'd each get $100,000, even split, no arguments. And the remaining few thousand, I figured we'd split it once Mac, the youngest, turned 21. I thought this would bring us closer together. I thought they'd be grateful. Instead, they saw me as a piggy bank. At 21, I found a small house I fell in love with. The price tag was $130,000, just $30,000 over my share. I couldn't get a mortgage, and my dad himself encouraged me to borrow the extra from the shared account. I trusted him. I took the $30,000, promising myself I'd pay it back before the boys turned 21. And I did start repaying. By the time Joe turned 21, I'd already paid back most of it. Only $13,000 was still missing. The account was at $195,000. That's when everything changed. Joe asked why the account was short. I told him the truth, openly and calmly. I said I was paying it back over 2 years, that it would be whole before Mac turned 21. Joe nodded. Then he turned around and told Mac I'd stolen from them. I went from loving older sister to thief overnight. They demanded I pay $16,000 back, including $3,000 in so-called interest in 6 months, not 2 years. I agreed to pay it back, but over 2 years as planned. They wrote up a contract. I was ready to sign until I saw they'd written in 6 months, not what we agreed. When I refused to sign, that's when the knives really came out. I got an email, clearly written by them, saying they'd be suing me for the $16,000 for emotional distress and, get this, any money left in the account. At this point, Joe had only received about $50,000 of his share. He wanted it in installments. But after this stunt, I cut them off. I told them legally they weren't owed anything, and that $50,000 was more than fair. That was all they were getting. The backlash was instant. They flooded my phone with calls, texts, emails, calling me a thief, a liar, a backstabber. I blocked them, so they went public. Joe and Mac posted on social media. They tagged me, accused me of robbing them of their inheritance. And worst of all, they convinced our extended family to harass me. People I barely knew were messaging me, calling me evil. I felt like the villain in a movie I didn't audition for. Then, just when I was starting to doubt myself, I got a message that changed everything. His name was Chris Smith. He said he was 27 and my half-brother. I didn't believe him at first, until he sent me childhood photos of us, of our grandparents, and even of him with my dad. He wasn't lying. Chris also showed me his own account with $150,000 in it. He had a letter, too, from our grandparents, saying the money was for children born out of Dad's affairs. Chris wasn't the only one. There was another half-sibling, a sister, just 18. My jaw hit the floor. Our grandparents had created 2 separate accounts, one for children from my dad and mom's marriage, me, one for the children from my dad's affairs, Chris and my sister. They knew. They knew my dad had messed around, and they planned accordingly to protect us from this exact situation. Chris and I checked with the solicitor. Legally, Joe and Mac had no claim whatsoever to my fund, or to Chris's. So I lawyered up. I sent Mac and Joe a formal letter telling them to back off, stop harassing me, and enjoy their $50,000 because that was all they'd ever get. The day they got the letter, Chris got a private message from our dad asking if Joe and Mac could have some of his money. Seriously. Chris said no and told Dad that he and I had connected. I guess Dad thought he could play us all like fools. But instead, the truth tore his whole house apart. I told Mac and Joe about Chris and our other sister, with Chris's permission. That bombshell hit hard. Turns out my dad's wife, Mac and Joe's mom, didn't know about the other kids. She especially didn't know that my half-sister was born after they got married. She lost it, kicked my dad out. He's been living in a hotel ever since. And now, the money is gone. Joe has the $50,000 and has zero intention of sharing it with Mac. Mac is furious. He thought I robbed him, but now realizes Joe actually did. Their bond? Shattered. Their parents' marriage? Possibly over. And my dad? He's been begging me to reconsider, to help bring the family back together. But after everything, I'm done. The boys who once saw me as a cash machine tried to squeeze me for a few extra grand and ended up burning down their own house instead. They lost more than money. They lost their family, their trust, their reputation. And the sweet part? I didn't have to lift a finger. I just held my ground, let the truth come out, and watched karma do her job. Sometimes doing what's fair still makes you the villain in someone else's story. But standing up for yourself, especially when family betrays you, isn't selfish. It's survival. And sometimes, it's justice. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and subscribe and follow for more jaw-dropping revenge stories just like this one. And tell us in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed? We want to hear your stories.